Good morning. My name is Ben Carrison. This is a concrete carpenter section. The date today, February 21st, 2024. We're going to be going over concrete wall forming today. I'm going to be taking you through the many sections of the different hardware that goes into forming concrete, goes into forming different walls. We have many different things from snap ties to brackets, John A brackets, turnbuckles, hairpin ties, plywood, whalers, things like this of this nature. So we'll be going all over a lot of this during this training session, and we'll also be going around about the ways and the methods of forming and the certain steps to form a concrete wall. It's a step-by-step process in doing so. So in doing so, I am going to start out by pointing out some of the hardware that goes into the wall forming process. Hopefully you can see it a little bit better. A lot of the hardware that we use is going to be similar from job to job. Now the wall forming that we're going to be going over today is what you guys are actually doing out there in the field, and it's going to be forming with plywood. Okay, plywood, snap tie system with John A brackets and whalers also. Okay, and that's what you see depicted here in this picture. This is a corner wall, inside corner, form aligners. Okay, we have strong backs here, strong backs here, strong backs here. These are used to align the forms. Okay, John A brackets. This is the strong back combined with the 2x4. That's used for form aligning. We have things called John A brackets, which are used. These are used to connect the whalers for the short end ties, short end snap ties. We have different snap ties. This is a snap tie. It breaks off inside the wall after you're done forming. That's what connects each one of these John A brackets, as well as these hairpins with the strong backs. This simply goes on here with plywood. There'll be a piece of 3/4 inch plywood here. John A bracket goes inside, and the John A or the whaler goes inside the John A bracket, and the John A bracket closes and tightens down on the whaler, which happens to be sitting in here. And that's what you're looking at right here, the whaler system, the John A bracket with the whaler system. I did mention the snap tie already. This is one thing that you use. Now these snap ties, have different lengths. Whether it's a short tail tie, this, just to connect with one John A bracket, as you can see here, one whaler with one John A bracket. We also have long tail ties, okay? Long tail ties here on our strong backs. And what the long tail tie is, it allows for a double whaler system. Not only is there a whaler going up, but then there's a whaler coming back, and it allows the hairpin to connect in here. And that's what you're looking at here with your strong back system and form aligner. You're looking at a long tail snap tie here and a short tail snap tie here. Both of them 8-inch spreaders inside that wall. So that's a little bit about the hardware that we're going to be using. I'd like to talk to you about the process of actually forming the wall. Where do we get started? You look at this wall, it's very intricate. I see a lot of hardware, I see a lot of parts here, I see turnbuckles, I see uprights, strong backs, John A brackets, hairpins. Shoot, where do I start, right? I know there's blockouts that go in there. Bulkheads go on the end somewhere. Whalers are in there. Where do I start? Okay. Actually, if you take it by a step-by-step process and go do one step first and then follow it with the next step and the next step, it can be a relatively simple process. Our first process, we're going to start with our inside plate line. Okay. This is the inside of our wall. First thing we're going to do is get a chalk line. Chalk line for our inside plate. Okay. That chalk line is going to be 3/4 of an inch back to accommodate for the plywood that's going to end up getting nailed to the plate. when I say plate, it's this bottom plate right here, our sole plate. That's gonna be 3/4 back from our layout line. 3/4 back from where we want our concrete, okay? Now it's very important that we get this sole plate right where we need it. Because if that sole plate's not where we need it, the plywood's not gonna be where we need it, and therefore our concrete's not gonna be where we need that also, right? So our first step is gonna be to get that sole plate down, get our chalk line down, get that sole plate down. If you're going into concrete, you're gonna have to roto hammer it down, okay, using whatever wedge anchors you're using. If you're going into plywood, like we're going into our floors out here, we're just nailing it down with 16 double heads. Typically, we're going into concrete that will have rebar coming out of it. So that's gonna be our first step. After we get our first step down, we get our sole plate down. On this wall here, let me revert to our plans. On this wall here, which is basically a 12-inch wall, I'm sorry, 12-foot wall by about 8 feet, more or less, we're gonna start at our inside corner, okay? We're gonna nail our inside corner here to our sole plate that we've already installed, and we're gonna plumb that corner up all the way. We're gonna, first of all, nail it here to our sole plates, plumb up both sides. So having a true plumb corner, nailed all the way up that seam with single head 8s, okay, 8 sinkers or 6 sinkers. And then from that corner, then we can start branching out, okay? One thing we have to have done already before we start laying our plywood out, or before we start installing our plywood, is to have our snap tie holes both laid out and drilled. It's a lot easier to drill them before you install them, before you stand them up. Okay, it's a lot easier to drill 4 or 5 sheets down on your sawhorses with your layout than it is to stand them up and then mark them out with chalk line, figure out where the holes are, right? So you're gonna wanna do your snap tie layout first, drill your holes with a 9/16 drill bit, 9/16 paddle bit. The reason it's 9/16 is because our snap tie end is just about a 1/2 inch. So that 9/16 just allows just a little bit extra room that we could fit that snap tie head in there. So after we get our 9/16 holes in, then we're gonna start by here plumbing this corner up, and then we can pretty much go each way, okay? One thing we're gonna wanna make sure that when we start laying our plywood, we're gonna cleat them together to keep these seams tight. If our seams aren't tight, we're gonna have little noticeable seams in our plywood, in our concrete when we're done pouring, okay? When we strip our forms off, we'll have noticeable seams. So we're gonna want all those seams nice and plumb, but also nice and tight together. But so if we get this corner up, that should pretty much hold it. But when we're coming out here 16 feet, if we don't have any temporary braces or anything in there before we get our snap ties and our brackets and our whalers in there, that plywood could come down and cause an injury, right? So we're gonna wanna make sure that when we are installing this plywood, that we're making sure that it's at least temporary braced up, okay? It could be just a quick 4-foot 2x4 coming off the nail, coming off the floor just to hold it up. But we don't want that plywood coming down, right? So after we get our plywood up and it's temporary bracing and everything, now it's time for our snap ties, snap ties, brackets, and whalers. So we get our snap ties in, you push them in from the back side. We tell our people we want to make sure that there's no one getting hurt on the other side. You're pushing these tie holes through. We want to make sure somebody doesn't get poked in the eye or poked in the ear or something. So good communication with your crew who's on the back side and that. Anyway, we get those snap ties in accordingly, long tails, short tails, wherever they go. We've got that predetermined already before we go out to the field. And then we start running our brackets, our John A brackets with our snap ties, okay? After we get our brackets in, our John A's, then we can run our cross whalers. Okay, the cross whalers are gonna go before our strong backs. Okay, those gotta go in first. So we'll run each one of these. We're doing a 16-inch tie layout. 8 inches up, 16 inches from there. 8 inches, 2 foot, 40 inches, 56, 72, 88, basically. So 6 ties per row. Okay, that's gonna be our tie layout. 16-inch centers this going up, 2-foot centers horizontally. 1 foot, 3 foot, but 2-foot centers horizontally is our basic tie layout. After we get our ties up and our whalers and our brackets, then it's gonna be time to put our strong backs and our turnbuckles with our bracing, okay? After we get that turnbuckles in, these 2x4s are they're gonna lay in here. They can be toe-nailed to the whalers. Come in with our hairpin tie on top of that. Our strong backs are getting nailed in from the edge, also getting nailed in here. Our strong backs, we wanna make sure when we are installing them, that we leave plenty of room for movement in both directions. So we want to make sure that that screw jack's not all the way pressed up tight or all the way out. You want to leave yourself a little movement in each direction, okay? That wall may have to come in or out. That's what this brace is for. This brace isn't to hold any lateral pressure. This is just for alignment, okay? So these can be used for alignment both during the pour, or both before the pour, and actually after the pour. As the concrete's still in its plastic state or wet, we can still move this around after we see it may have moved a little bit during the pour. Because you see, these will have a little bit of movement. They're not perfect, you know. It may move a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch here or there, especially with all the movement, the people walking around, scaffolding or things like that that may be on top of the wall. But after we get this aligned, we're gonna have all our brackets in here, all our strong backs up, the wall's gonna be aligned. Now it's time to put our bulkheads in. Any blockouts, if we've got any window blockouts, door blockouts, any things like that. Also our bulkheads. We're gonna have a bulkhead here on the end, also a bulkhead here on the other end, right? We wanna put those in before we start closing the panels up. Obviously in a typical situation when we're gonna be pouring a concrete wall, after we get the front side built, faced, and lined, they come in and tie a rebar cage behind that. And then afterwards, we'll put our outside plywood up. So that's kind of a briefing on basics, what basically goes into forming a concrete wall, as well as some of the hardware, John A brackets, hairpin ties, we have turnbuckles, bracing, strong backs, plywood, sole plates, okay? That's some of the basics that goes into forming a concrete wall. So I appreciate all your attention today. Again, my name is Ben Carrison. It's February 21st, 2024, and this is for my WeFed class. Thank you.